Imagine standing in a high-end bridal boutique, surrounded by layers of white silk and lace, clutching a veil that represents your lifelong dream. Now, imagine your phone vibrating with a 47-second call that shatters every illusion you've ever held about your family. My name is Athena, and 3 weeks before my wedding, my mother called to tell me she and my father wouldn't be attending. Why? Because the date happened to coincide with my younger sister Clarissa's 30th birthday party. I stood there in the fitting room, my reflection staring back at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. I wasn't just a daughter. For the last 8 years, I had been the family's secret benefactor, sending exactly $2,500 every single month to cover my parents' mortgage and my sister's extravagant lifestyle. I was the reliable one, the strong one, the one who supposedly didn't need a pat on the back because I was too busy keeping everyone else afloat. My mother's voice had been casual, almost bored, as she explained that Clarissa had been planning this milestone birthday for months and it wouldn't be fair to overshadow her special day with a wedding. "You understand, don't you, Athena?" she had asked. "You've always been so independent." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even cry. I simply set the phone down on a velvet stool and looked at the white dress I had paid for with my own sweat and tears. At that moment, 32 years of being the extra daughter finally clicked into place. I realized that my value in that house wasn't measured by love, it was measured by the balance in my checkbook. But what my mother didn't realize was that a reliable daughter is only reliable until she decides to stop being a victim. The 47-second call was the end of my silence, but it was also the beginning of a total financial blackout that would leave my family scrambling in the dark. Wait until you see what happens when the first of the month rolls around and the family ATM finally goes out of service. How will they react when the money stops flowing? For 8 years, I was the invisible pillar holding up a house that didn't have room for me. Every month, like clockwork, $2,500 left my account and landed in my parents'. It paid for the mortgage on the house where my sister, Clarissa, lived rent-free in the master suite while she found herself as an aspiring influencer. It paid for my father's golf club memberships and my mother's weekly spa days. I was told this was family loyalty, but standing in that bridal shop, I realized it was actually a subscription fee for a love I was never going to receive. I didn't call my mother back to argue about the birthday party. Instead, I sat on the small circular stage in the dressing room, still wearing the $4,000 gown, and opened my banking app. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I scrolled down to the scheduled transfer section. There it was, family support, recurring. With one steady tap, I hit delete. The silence that followed was heavy. I knew that by canceling that transfer, I wasn't just stopping the money. I was pulling the rug out from under their entire lifestyle. I spent the next week in a state of eerie calm, waiting for the first of the month to arrive. I didn't block them. I wanted to see exactly how long it would take for family loyalty to turn into financial panic. The first of the month hit on a Tuesday. At 9:01 a.m., my phone began to vibrate. It didn't stop for 3 hours. 16 missed calls from my mother. 5 from my father. And a string of increasingly frantic texts from Clarissa that started with "Hey girl, is the app down?" and ended with "Athena, answer your phone, the bank is calling dad." When I finally picked up, I didn't hear a mother's voice. I heard the voice of a woman whose ATM had just swallowed her card. "Athena, there's been a terrible mistake," she shrieked. "The mortgage payment bounced. We could lose the house." I took a slow sip of my coffee, looking out at the city skyline from my office window. "It's not a mistake, Mom," I said calmly. "I've just decided to reallocate those funds toward my wedding. Since you won't be there, I figured I'd use the extra money to upgrade the open bar." But the cancelled mortgage was only the beginning. My mother was hiding a much darker secret about where that $2,500 a month was really going, and it involved a legal document Clarissa had forged in my name. I didn't wait for my parents to call again. I drove straight to the 3-bedroom house in the Portland suburbs, the house I had been keeping afloat for nearly a decade. When I walked through the front door, the air felt heavy with the smell of expensive candles and unearned luxury. Clarissa was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, while my mother paced the floor like a caged animal. "Athena, thank goodness," my mother cried, rushing toward me. The bank said the payment didn't clear. You have to fix it. We told you, the birthday party is a huge event, and we can't have the power being shut off or the bank breathing down our necks. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at Clarissa, who wouldn't even meet my eyes. I went to the bank this morning, I said, my voice dropping an octave. But I didn't go to make a payment. I went to ask why the mortgage amount had increased by $800 last year. The room went deathly silent. Clarissa's thumb stopped moving over her screen. I found the paperwork, I continued, tossing a folder of photocopies onto the coffee table. It wasn't a mortgage increase. It was a secondary personal loan, a $50,000 line of credit taken out 18 months ago. And imagine my surprise when I saw my signature on the guarantor line. A signature I never wrote. My mother's face went from pale to a blotchy, guilty red. Clarissa finally looked up, her expression shifting from boredom to a sharp, defensive sneer. It was just a loan, Athena. I needed the equipment for my brand, and Dad said you wouldn't mind because you have so much money anyway. You're getting married to a tech executive. Why do you care about a few $1,000s? They hadn't just used me as an ATM. They had committed identity theft to fund Clarissa's delusions of grandeur, and my parents had stood by and watched it happen. My father walked into the room then, seeing the documents on the table. He didn't offer an apology. He just sighed and said, Athena, don't be dramatic. We're family. You aren't actually going to report your own sister, are you? My father thought family was a shield that protected them from the law. He was wrong. But the biggest shock was still to come, because the $50,000 loan wasn't the only thing Clarissa had stolen. The music was thumping, and the Happy 30th Clarissa banner was draped across the living room of the house I had been paying for. My sister was center stage, holding a glass of vintage champagne, wearing a designer dress likely bought with the loan she stole in my name. When I walked in, the room didn't go silent, not yet. My mother rushed over, her eyes darting around nervously. Athena, you came. Does this mean you fixed the bank issue? We have guests to entertain. I didn't say a word. I walked straight to the gift table and placed a small, beautifully wrapped box in front of Clarissa. Happy birthday, sis, I said, my voice cutting through the pop music like a razor. Open it. It's the only thing I'm ever giving you again. The crowd gathered around as Clarissa tore through the silk ribbon, expecting jewelry or a check. Her smirk vanished the moment she pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. It wasn't a gift. It was a formal notice of a police report for identity theft and a demand for the immediate repayment of the $50,000 loan. You reported me. Clarissa gasped, the color draining from her face as the guests began to whisper. I reported a crime, I corrected her. And since the bank now knows the signature was forged, they've already frozen the accounts. Which means this house, the one I've been subsidizing for 8 years, will be in foreclosure by the end of the month. My father tried to grab my arm, his voice a desperate, pathetic whisper. Athena, stop this. This will ruin her life. Think about the family. I looked at him, the man who had watched my sister rob me and called it loyalty. I pulled my arm away. I'm thinking about my family, I said. The one I'm starting in 2 weeks with a man who actually respects me. A wedding that none of you are invited to. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. 2 weeks later, I stood at the end of a different aisle. There were no forged signatures, no monthly subscriptions for love, and no empty seats in the front row. I wasn't just a bride, I was a woman who had finally stopped paying for a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. If you've ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to save yourself, drop a MY turn in the comments. Your peace is worth more than their approval. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice and new beginnings.